Hello students, welcome to week 7 for PRL 580. This week we are considering ethical considerations of international and global practice in public relations. As you look at the week 7 agenda, you'll see we are starting to wrap up some of the primary course content and move into our final exam and critical assignments. This week we are completing chapters 10 and 11 in the Curtin and Gaither text, as well as chapters 13 through 16 in the Golan text. In addition to that, we are completing assignment number 7, which is due on Sunday. We have a discussion board due on Friday with replies due on Sunday, as well as our critical assignment due no later than next Wednesday. As we move through the course content, it's important to see that discussion board number 7 asks us to look at page 229 of the text and examine what the Amber and Comrie and Fitch case is. Particularly, you will be providing some reflection and insight as to what your opinions are of this case, and write a 500-word post that includes information from a media source as well as to what happened with Amber, Comrie, and Fitch. Make sure you're considering all ethical considerations when it comes to international public relations practice within this discussion. In addition, do not forget this is due on Friday and you will need to reply to other course mates no later than Sunday. Assignment number 7 asks you to complete four things after you complete the reading this week. Primarily, this assignment will draw upon the Curtin and Gaither text, while the discussion board will use our Golan text. So it's important to know that each question here asks you to start to look at and examine ethical behavior in the global marketplace, as well as looking at cultural relativism in many different ways and how it pertains to the course content. So it's important to know that as we look through these things, we are understanding and looking at the importance of ethical behavior, as well as how you would approach the idea of balancing local norms and customs within your organization from international sources, as well as discussing cultural relativism and how it impacts your PR practice, and providing an overview of the practice matrix and explain its usefulness for international PR efforts. This entire assignment should be 1,000 words. Students that score in the exemplary category, so if they earn an A on this assignment, typically have at least 2 to 3 outside sources besides the course text to support their ideas within their paper. So do keep that in mind. In addition, you should be working on your final assignments that are due in week 8. Week 8 is a short week per usual, so it's important that you get started on those early rather than later. When we're looking at circulating global practice in public relations, it's important to keep in mind that there are a couple of things that we need to utilize to do this effectively. Now, the chapter 10 sets up a great practice matrix for public relations work that helps us understand and to be able to better disseminate information out globally with understanding obviously cultural and economic models that help us within the practice matrix. An international public relations worldview acknowledges assumptions based on historicity, organizational presence, age, race, class, gender, and all other demographical information, including culture and influence. Influence particularly means and relates to digital influence, looking at and identifying with what social media outlets that various countries or international groups use, as well as what they post and how they post those items, helps pertain to what influence key stakeholders in that society have on different demographics. Now, the practice matrix in this chapter is very, very beneficial, and in fact, it's something you should spend some time looking at a lot this week. It wasn't feasible to put into our lecture here, but it's very important to know that the practice matrix promotes a worldview by bringing together the moments of the circuit of culture into a practical format for public relations practice. Specifically, the moment of regulation found in the circuit of culture includes predisposing factors and is a useful starting point for the practice matrix. The practice matrix really is intended not to solve PR challenges, but to identify pathways to negotiate diverse landscapes of international public relations practice. So using this matrix will help you not solve challenges in the international landscape for public relations, but help you identify pathways to negotiate that diverse landscape and understanding the cultural implications of navigating a PR campaign in another country. With that, each moment in the practice matrix is divided into two areas: situational factors and actions. It's important to know that situational factors are questions for PR practitioners and scholars to consider each moment, and actions are signposts to guide activity within each moment. So our situational factors are the things that we take into account that could potentially influence our campaign or our PR actions, our actual tactics and things of that nature, either positively or negatively within a PR campaign. So understanding and listing as many situational factors as we can really help you firmly understand how your campaign will be implicated or actually influential within the country that you are delivering the content to. So looking at actions as signposts to guide activity in each moment will help you significantly in utilizing this practice matrix. It's important to know that there are cultural and ethical relativism issues when it comes to PR. Chapter 11 spends a significant amount of time looking at cultural relativism in ethical considerations with global practice. It's really important to know that culture informs how we talk, think, act, and in turn our language, thoughts, and actions are shaped by the relational flow of power. This is integral to all communicative enterprises, and then our competing truths and power imbalances make ethics inherent into everyday public relations practice, especially within the international atmosphere. So it's very important that it's important to consider ethical underpinnings that have run through many different ideas within our course text and within our course, specifically to the area of globalization. Understanding that globalization brings to the forefront of international PR practice two particular ethical issues to consider that really result from the interplay of culture and power. Cultural relativism and growing power disparities between the rich and the poor can result in what many call a new form of colonialism. It's important that when we draw heavily on the interactions between those two moments on the circuit of culture, regulation, and identity, to demonstrate how they inform ethical decision makings and the ways in which PR materials are produced, consumed, and represented. So cultural relativism deals with cultures that develop different norms and customs. It was really known as that phenomenon, cultural relativism, as well as successful commerce, communication, and such. So although globalization has become a recent buzzword, it's not a new phenomenon. In fact, when we look at cultural relativism, looking at cultures that develop different norms and customs, and successful commerce and communication depend on adapting and adjusting to those differences, it's important that it's not always easy to adopt the local practices of the countries in which we are launching these PR campaigns in, that we may not have those cultural ideas that we adopt here in whatever country you may be in. So it's important to know that there can be in a bit of a conundrum here. The difference is not that one culture is more ethical than the other. It is that what constitutes ethical action varies by culture. So the essence of cultural relativism is within that whole idea. In the U.S., cultural norms value individualism and personal responsibility, where in Singapore, cultural norms place value on social networks and the support for the group. So what we view as an ethical norm within America could be significantly different in how that's portrayed in Singapore. So it's important to keep some of those things in mind. It's important to know that Western public relation professionals really seek to work with local organizations as a client and following those local norms to help organizers cover things that are going on communicatively within an organization. This may not be the function of other PR practices abroad, so keeping up with that and allowing the adaptation to local customs may be good manners and foster better relations in doing so, but if it's done without any set of universal ethical standards, it typically can be unethical. So it's important that anytime we adapt local customs to foster better relations with an organization abroad, that we are using a set of universal ethical standards, and we've done our due diligence and research to really understand how that relates to the organization. So as we negotiate through cultural relativism, it's important to work through a negotiation process that's helpful to examine ethical conflicts in light of a cultural economic model. Going back and looking at ideas and what their news has covered and what historically has been covered in terms of cultural ethical conundrums in a country is very relevant in terms of developing important content or communication that's going to go out in a campaign. So it's important to know that utilizing and cultivating key informants, people from local cultures who are willing to help you navigate it, will help you balance cultural generalizations and situational particulars. Because this process can be time-consuming, international PR efforts and firms often partner with local firms to gain comprehensive knowledge more quickly. It's important to know that ethics emerges as a confluence of moments and regulation identity, although ethics is inherent in all aspects of PR practice internationally. International practice for public relations practitioners must balance organizational norms with respect for local practices, negotiating a position along the continuum between ethical absolutism and cultural relativism. Enlightened self-interest in public relations practice leads to short-term measures, paternalism, and poor PR overall. Philanthropy results from partnering with organizations and local communities to resolve issues and address underlying root causes that typically lead to effective PR. Commonly discussed approaches to public relations ethics do not sufficiently address the challenges posed by globalization. It's very important that practitioners, like yourself, must assume a trader's identity, deconstructing dominant discourse and challenging organizational assumptions and seeking out value and diversity as well as dissent. Considering any of the theories we've covered this term will really help you in this idea of understanding that we just can't simply provide a cookie-cutter approach to adopting new cultural norms when we develop campaigns in different countries that hold different cultural traditions. It's very important that we do our due diligence and we do not pay lip service to what those norms are, but rather we provide them with a very robust campaign that really truly speaks to those that we are focusing on within the campaign within that country. So do keep in mind we are completing assignment number 7 on Sunday this week. We have discussion board number 7 due on Friday with replies due on Sunday. Keep working on your critical assignment and final exam due early next week. You should be reading chapter 10 and 11 of the Curtin and Gaither text and chapters 13 through 16 of the Golan text. If you have any questions, reach out. I look forward to interacting with you this week. God bless.